Hey, what's going on, gang? This is Nate on the Stone. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are asking the question, just how great is America? There's a pattern in the way that stories are run in the mainstream media. If you notice, every year around Christmas time or Easter, you'll see stories that say, well, Jesus wasn't actually born on December 25th. Or you know what, he never actually rose from the dead. And Independence Day is no different. Every year, come around July 4th, we're going to see stories from both sides of the political aisle that say either, America, product of the Enlightenment, is the best of the best of the best!
With honors.
Or racism, colonialism, imperialism, sexism, classism, ableism. America has never been great. And this year, just like clockwork, over at the New York Times, Nayeema Raza and Teja Jensen released an opinion video entitled, "Please Stop Telling Me America is Great," which, as the title suggests, ensured that it quickly made the rounds of Twitter and the other social media sites. From the title alone, it's pretty easy to see which side of the aisle that video falls on, but today we're going to take a look at it to see if any of its critiques and any of its arguments actually hold water. Raza and Jensen start things off with this.
America, the greatest country on earth. A narrative packed and sold to tiny patriots, reinforced by every cartoon, movie, cheeseburger, and mattress sale.
Guaranteed.
Okay, so far I don't see a problem here.
Now, listen, of course there's no single way to measure greatness, but one good test is how we rank in the OECD, which is basically a golf club of 36 countries, predominantly wealthy, Western, and democratic. And unlike most golf clubs, this one's got some diversity too. America is the richest country in this club, but we're also the poorest, with a whopping 18% poverty rate, closer to Mexico than Western Europe.
And here is where the problems start. This is technically true, but it is still very misleading. Philip Klein over at the Washington Examiner pointed out that the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, doesn't compare the living conditions of the people of the member countries. Instead, it looks at, quote, the share of people living with less than half the median disposable income in their countries. Which means that even though on average people in the United States have higher incomes than people in other member countries, the OECD still qualifies these people as being impoverished, even though they're actually bringing in more income. And this fact of bringing in more income actually makes the poor in the US rich by most of the world's standards. In the 2001 extended edition of his book Intellectuals and Society, Dr. Thomas Sowell pointed out that 75% of the American poor have access to air conditioning, 98% have access to a color television, 97% either had a VCR or a DVD player, luxuries that would have been beyond the reach of the poor in most of the world. But that was 2001, this is 2019. But it's still true. According to MarketWatch, the poor in America are still able to spend 40% on their income on what we would classify as luxury items. I should also mention here that according to Aaron Blake over at the Washington Post, the US Census Bureau doesn't use the same metrics to calculate poverty as the OECD does. The Bureau actually uses more complex income thresholds, which means that according to the Bureau in 2017, only 12.3% of the American population was living in poverty, not 18%.
Turns out at the level of high school science, we're 19th of 36. Reading, 20th. And math, a dismal 30th.
Yeah, this one is kind of true. American students are way behind their international counterparts. Heck, it's not even just in science, math, and reading. American students don't even know their own American history anymore. According to the nation's report card, which is produced by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, in 2010, only 12% of American high school seniors were proficient in American history. But how can this be? The US on average spends 30% more on education than other OECD countries, meaning in 2015, this translated to the United States spending $11,131 for every student in either the primary or secondary school system. Well, one problem is the top-down approach to education that has been taken by the federal government. This really started with Title I, which was part of President Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty. But the thing about Title I is that initially, it was actually very limited in scope, only dealing with areas in which there was a high concentration of low-income families. It was President George W. Bush who greatly extended the expanse and reach of Title I with his No Child Left Behind Act, and then President Obama expanded it again with his Race to the Top initiative, in which his administration told states that in exchange for curriculum reforms, at the heart of which was Common Core, and for other reforms such as performance-based evaluations of teachers and administrations, the states could receive federal grant money. But as Ray Domenico pointed out in City Journal, there were three main problems with this top-down approach. One, these reforms were directed at all schools all across America, whether they actually needed to be reformed or not. Second was the federal government's belief that the only purpose of primary education was college preparation, even though a passing score pre-college is not the same at all to the National Assessment of Educational Progress as criteria for higher education, which actually looks at competency in different complex subject matters. And three, parents were discounted entirely from these reforms. Another problem with American education is the obsession that bureaucrats have with graduation rates. America's Promise Alliance, a group dedicated to giving children what they need so that they can succeed as adults, according to their website, was very proud of the fact that the federal government and the United States in general was working towards a 90% graduation rate for high school, even though higher graduation rates do not always necessarily equal competency in subject matters. Kentucky has an 89.7% graduation rate for high school students, but 1/3 of those high school students, when they walk across the bridge, only receive a worthless diploma because the graduation requirements in Kentucky are ridiculously simple and easy. And yet another problem in the American education system is the infestation of the social justice mentality and wokeness. Reporting on the American Educational Research Association's annual conference, Max Eden, writing over at City Journal, said, quote, "The conference program demonstrates a preoccupation with promoting a virulent new brand of racism. A keyword search of the conference program reveals 422 hits for whiteness, more than for personalized learning, 16, school boards, 19, standardized testing, 20, high school graduation, 23, reading achievement, 24, digital learning, 25, policy analysis, 31, early education, 38, teacher evaluation, 41, literacy instruction, 42, bilingual education, 48, and achievement gap, 75 combined. A symposium called The Interrogation of Whiteness in Progressive Public Schools promises to explore the experience of teachers and education leaders who work to undo whiteness in public schools. A featured paper in that session is Trust, Community, and Dismantling White Dominance. Another, Critical Race Elementary Schooling. Teacher Change Agents Are Undoing Whiteness in Elementary Schools, celebrates teachers who actively resist elements of whiteness. Not the best way to teach kids how to read, write, and do math.
We have freedom in America, and everyone's jealous or something.
The enemies of freedom.
Pursuing the enemies of freedom.
The enemies of freedom.
And other enemies of freedom.
Turns out, a lot of countries have freedoms. And while we boast about them, using our rights is a different story. Only 56% of Americans turn out to vote, while it's closer to 80% in countries like Denmark and Australia.
Yes, many countries, especially those that we would call part of Western civilization, do have freedom. But many of those countries received those freedoms or their ideas of freedom after the American Revolution spread to Europe. Also, compared to countries like the UK, which only has an unwritten constitution spread across various legal historical documents, the most important rights that we cherish here in America are actually guaranteed and protected by being physically written down in the Constitution, which in addition to that also helps preserve our freedom by dividing power not just between the three branches of the federal government, but also between the federal government and the states. And yes, while the lack of voter participation is bad, You could also interpret that as Americans just exercising their freedom. After all, America doesn't fine you or punish you if you don't vote in elections, like Australia does.
And it's getting worse. This year, America slid on global rankings of corruption and freedom and dropped from a functional to a flawed democracy.
Forget for a moment that the United States was founded as a republic instead of a democracy. One reason for this slide is that people no longer trust our public institutions. When you have people in Congress who continually break their promises, like closing and securing the border, when you have former public servants openly say that yes, they out and out lied to the American people in order to push a particular agenda, and when people in the media and entertainment say 24/7 that we are living in an authoritarian state, and the proof of that is that the LGBTQIA rainbow flag isn't going to be flown at American embassies during June, what did we really expect to happen?
When health, education, and safety are increasingly privatized or driven by privilege, the truth is, how great America is really depends on how rich you are.
There it is! I knew we were going to get to it eventually. America is only great for certain individuals because they either have money or they've got privilege. Guess what? That's true no matter where you go in the world. And when being poor in America means that you can frill away 40% of your income on luxury items, when you can demand that police officers actually leave a public space because you feel unsafe, when you can actually burn your country's flag as a sign of protest and have that protected as free speech, and when the government makes it insanely easy for anyone who wants to vote to actually be able to vote, not only are Americans, every one of us, rich in the eyes of the rest of the world, but we are also insanely privileged. Privileged to actually be Americans. I could end the video right here, but I want to take a moment to say something else. America is great, is still great, but not just because we're rich, not just because we have a good economy, not just because we have a written constitution, not just because we've got a great military. We are great, even today, because we took what was true and what was proven to work from the past, and we incorporated it into ourselves. In his book, The Roots of American Order, Russell Kirk says that from the ancient Israelites came the idea of a God who didn't just come around to teach people how to be good, but who was actually goodness in and of himself. From the Greeks, especially from the city of Athens, came reason, shown especially in the persons of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, but also the idea of freedom, seen especially in the Greek resistance to the Persians. From the ancient Romans came the idea that order and liberty are necessary prerequisites for freedom to actually exist. Remember John Adams's admonition that only a moral and religious people would actually be able to make the American Constitution work. And from England we received our language, our laws, and our customs. These four cities, Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, and London, were all present in American society before, during, and after 1776, and they all came together in Philadelphia in 1787 for the Constitutional Convention. These ideas of an objective, unchanging standard of goodness, of reason and faith, of order and virtue and liberty, they gave us the civilization that we have today, where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is the norm. And it's true, we haven't always lived up to that ideal, but that ideal has always been there. And I could end the video right here, but I want to say one more thing, a little word of warning, if you will. After he toured the United States, Alexis de Tocqueville said that America is great. And this was before the OECD, before we became a world superpower, before the federal government started mucking around with the education system. But what's interesting is the reason that de Tocqueville gave for why America is great. And the reason he gave is that America is great because America is good. When she ceases to be good, he said, she will cease to be great. So if you want to keep saying every 4th of July that America is the best of the best of the best, make sure that she's still good. But what say you? Is America still great today because of our heritage and because of our ideals? Or have politicians' broken promises and the sins of the past not made America great anymore? As always, let me know your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions down in the comments section below. Well, that about wraps up everything for right now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by giving it a like and sharing it on Twitter and the other social media platforms. And if you like videos about the culture, politics, and religion, but from a different POV, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and to ring the bell for notifications, so that you will always know when I post new videos just like this every Tuesday. Videos you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a little bit of your day. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed to my channel. And I will see you all again here next week, gang, on Top of the Stone. Ciao.